Hello, my name is Andy Jones. I'm the CEO for Fortress Security Risk Management, a division of MCPC. Thank you for joining me for this Athena's Podium conversation. Today, we will discuss the 5 megatrends that are destabilizing our digital world, and we will contemplate a different approach to cybersecurity, an approach that moves our industry from being on its back foot to leaning in. The first megatrend, the unrelenting cyber attacks. As we are all painfully aware, the quantity, sophistication, and severity of cyber attacks are increasing at alarming rates. And every day, it's getting easier and cheaper for the bad actors to do their bad acting. The cost to launch an attack is measured in fractions of pennies, the damage measured in millions of dollars. These attacks are top of mind with most executives. According to a very expansive survey conducted last year by Allianz, 2,650 risk managers from 89 countries said that cyber was the #1 risk to businesses. No surprise, but our greatest risk is the growth of pure economic terrorists. These criminal enterprises with contemporary corporate structures, research and development, finance, negotiations, marketing and affiliate networks, and 1-800 customer support are insidious, amoral, aggressive, highly competent, and truly frightening. In the past, you had to be a coding genius to be a successful bad actor. Times have most certainly changed. The barrier to entry into a life of cybercrime has come down substantially. A ransomware as a service monthly subscription can be had for about what you pay monthly for a streaming service. Imagine that. For what you pay for Netflix, you could have your own ransomware business with about the same complexity. The speed at which these attacks are morphing and advancing is nothing less than breathtaking. Make no mistake, we are in an arms race. For you Gen Xers, we all know a good arms race when we see it. But the bad actors, in many ways, are better funded, and they are playing by a no-rules philosophy. Enter artificial intelligence. As recently as January of this year, we have seen ChatGPT used to create an exploit for a recent Microsoft vulnerability. You heard me correctly. The cyber terrorists can now use artificial intelligence to create the malware for them, radically reducing development time and costs. You're probably wondering, how big of a problem is this actually? According to Accenture, the global financial impact of cybercrime will hit $8 trillion this year. That's a big number. If cybercrime were a country with a GDP of 8 trillion, it would be the third wealthiest nation in the world behind the United States and China. Still can't wrap your head around how big that number is? In the time it will take us to complete this session, nearly $250 million of cybercrime and damages will have occurred. 43% of all attacks are against small businesses. Regardless of the size of an organization, attacks are quickly pivoting toward those most vulnerable, those small and mid-sized organizations. The attacks will continue to evolve as we move more and more to a multi-cloud, distributed, interconnected economy. The targets will shift. By 2025, 45% of organizations are expected to experience a software supply chain intrusion. In 2022, it took, on average, 277 days to detect and contain a data breach. But who's doing this? Who are these bad actors, these cyber terrorists? We've all heard of nation-state sponsored cyber terrorism. If you're China, you're primarily looking for intellectual property. They have a plan. It's actually published. It's called Made in China 2025. There are 10 key verticals or industry segments that are targeted. IP theft is specifically called out as a tool to use to gain their desires. Want to know more about why and how China is stealing nearly $600 billion from the United States annually, I would encourage you to read my LinkedIn post, The Invisible Heist. Russia's motives are even more obvious. Political destabilization of Western democracies, especially via social media and through our election processes. Hungry for more information on this one? Allow me to recommend The Invisible War, Russia, Ukraine, and the Borderless War in 3 acts. It's a page turner if there ever was one. North Korea, well, that one's the easiest. It's money. The greatest portion of North Korea's attacks are against the world's financial institutions. It's really a good old-fashioned bank robbery, just modernized for our digital age. You're looking at the Korean Peninsula as seen from space. That empty blackness inside that red circle is North Korea. The bright lights to the south, South Korea. To the northwest, that's China. North Korea is a poor nation and lags far behind the region in economic development. Their state-sponsored cybercrimes fund their military and domestic initiatives. But what about Iran? Religious fundamentalism primarily drives their motives. The men who lead the regime have very, very different views from the West, specifically on women's rights, education, and religious freedoms, just to name a few. Activists. Think of these as your ideologues, those individuals or groups that seek out and target organizations and businesses that operate on the fringe. Perhaps they have environmental policies that are not widely accepted or agreed with. Think of an oil company. Activists will seek out to disrupt those organizations, discredit those organizations, and ultimately attempt to bring about their financial ruin. But the truth is, 97% of all cybercrime is just good old-fashioned criminal enterprise. It's guys and girls in small groups or large that are acting in concert, just like organized crime from years past. 97%. So for as much as we hear about nation-state sponsored terrorism or hacktivists, the truth is it's just good old-fashioned criminal syndicates that are doing the majority of the damage. What's their motive? Well, the motives are quite simple. Some of them we've discussed, but it's even more basic than that. These economic terrorists, by and large, especially the organized crime side, want your data. And if they don't want your data, they want your money. Why? Either one can be monetized easily. Business executives understand those motives. They understand those motives without needing to understand who's doing it or how they're doing it. As a general rule, business executives deal primarily with people, and with emotions, and with motives. These we can typically understand quite well. These incessant cyber attacks are creating a tremendous amount of pressure on the insurance industry, thus creating our second mega trend, this looming risk transfer problem. Business leaders focus on revenue generation, operational improvement, and reducing risk in their market space to be successful. Many executives view cyber as just another risk to be transferred. If you're concerned about theft in a chain of jewelry stores, you buy a policy. Maybe you make a product that might potentially harm your consumers. You buy a policy. Are you concerned about fire in your manufacturing facilities? You buy a policy. Enter stage right, cyber insurance policies. While cyber is clearly a risk that does want for an insurance policy, neither the sellers, underwriters, nor consumers of these policies actually understand the risk. There are 2 general types of risk, inherent and residual. There is inherent risk with the implementation of any technology or the leveraging of third parties, be that cloud service providers or managed service providers. We all collectively manage risk in 4 ways. We either avoid it, we attempt to reduce it, we accept it, or we attempt to transfer it. The residual risk is what's left over after we've attempted to manage it. The problem is, when it comes to cyber, for the last decade or so, The world has been trying to transfer the inherent risk, and that's not the right way. And it's terribly fraught with risks of its own. Risk transfer alone is not the answer. It's quickly becoming a two-tiered marketplace, the haves and the have-nots. Conditions are better for better risks, and tougher, sometimes quite a bit tougher, for less attractive risks. Denial of coverage is becoming more frequent. If your attestations don't match your reality, you can expect this to happen to you. You can't use cyber insurance as a substitute for implementing and showing proof of performance of cyber controls. Insurance is primarily designed for accidents, not for negligence. And now our third megatrend, the fallacy of compliance. Fortunately, many leaders do know and do view cyber as a business problem and are well versed in its motives, and they know when and where to deploy cyber insurance as a risk transfer mechanism. But frequently, they put their faith and their company's future in the hands of their compliance departments. This is likely the biggest lie we tell ourselves far too frequently in business, the lie that compliance will save us. That belief that we are somehow able to push a button and we will be protected. Our reliance on compliance as risk mitigation is a false flag. It's a paper shield businesses can no longer hide behind. It is imprudent to prioritize compliance. The insurance industry has recognized this, and the federal government has recognized it as well. Compliance does not equal resilience. It is a fallacy to believe a certification will protect the company, your employees, your brand, your operations, your careers, or your shareholders. You can pick any framework you like. You can check all the boxes you want. You may be protected legally, but you won't be protected financially or operationally from cyber attack. An organization that prioritizes compliance first is primarily interested in protecting their officers and fiduciaries from financial and legal penalties. Developing a program that has proper security controls that will meet 80 to 90% of all the regulatory compliance requirements, allowing your legal teams to focus on the remaining 10 to 20% through policies and procedures. Focus on doing the right thing and doing it consistently. The road to compliance is long and winding. One of the phrases we throw around frequently to measure the quality of a compliance program is the maturity of that program. To mature a program typically takes 3 to 5 years. There are actions that could be taken and can be taken to shorten that time frame, but we simply cannot bend time. In business, time is money, and frankly, time is running out on this topic. The fourth megatrend is the digital supply chain challenge. We live in an ever-increasing digitally connected world. Technology has transformed how we live, how we play, and most certainly how we work. Digital businesses have much greater reliance on their interconnectivity with their customers, their suppliers, their contractors, their cloud service providers, and their remote workers. Although this process for expanding revenue, optimizing operations, enabling talent management is very, very desirable, it also comes at a price. Too many organizations enter these relationships without considering the risk and the need to put in proper security controls. Supply chain attacks have been on the rise in the last few years, rapidly becoming one of the most dangerous security threats. In a recent BlueVoyant survey, 98% of respondents reported negative impact for supply chain cybersecurity breaches. Fun fact, nearly a fifth of all breaches occurred through a partner in your supply chain. The demands of our hyper-connected digital supply chain requires the use of cloud services, and these platforms make for great targets. IBM's 2022 breach report states that 45% of breaches occurred in these cloud service platforms. MSPs and MSSPs are fast becoming targets. Why? As an organization continues to leverage more managed service providers, these attacks and this attack vector will increase. IT leaders are being pushed to optimize their operation and reduce or standardize their costs. Additionally, with the labor and talent shortages, more companies are going to continue to turn to organizations that can assist them with these 24/7 operations. According to McKinsey, 35% of US workers now work remotely full-time. Another 23% work remotely occasionally. That's 58% of the entire US workforce working remotely at least part of the time. We all know that remote work has additional security requirements. On average, a breach involving remote workers costs us an additional $1 million to recover. With remote work here to stay, more consideration will likely be needed in this area. Have you ever had a credit card breach or an account issue with your bank? Who pays for that? Frankly, you do. We all do. 60% of organizations' breaches lead to increases in prices that are passed on to their customers. We can no longer look at third parties differently than we look at our own organizations. With the ever-evolving digital ecosystem, we need to ensure that we understand what we are sharing, who has the data, and how it is to be protected. And now, the last but far from least megatrend, the cyber talent problem. In a word, the cyber talent gap is widening. At the end of 2022, the number of people working globally in cyber had grown to nearly 4.7 million. That's about an 11% increase from the prior year in the world's cyber workforce. The problem is, there were still 3.4 million job openings. The world needed an additional 3.4 million cyber professionals. According to the International Monetary Fund, the world's economy grew at 3.4% in 2022. However, the demand for cyber talent grew 8 times faster. This trend does not look to flatten anytime soon, and why would it? In their most recent report, PurpleSec suggests that cybercrime grew an astounding and astonishing 600% over the prior year. When fires grow by 600%, the demand for firefighters will follow suit. The chasm is widening. We're going to have to imagine new and creative ways to cyber, if you will. Our current models are not sustainable. And as we all know, when you have more work than you have hands to do it, invariably burnout occurs. But we have burnout at a massive scale. When 4.7 million people are working in the field and an additional 3.4 million are needed, we're short-staffed by about 40%. Burnout is inevitable. Our approach to cyber must change. The good news, we're going to have plenty of external pressures driving us to adapt and evolve, but far more rapidly than we'd likely hoped. We are at the intersection of 5 megatrends that are creating that perfect storm. And as with any major storm, there is a great deal of direct and collateral damage. We're rapidly approaching that tipping point. We must move quickly to change the discourse with business executives. We must shift from a compliance-first mentality. Compliance has its place and it's valuable, but we must start with resilience. Organizations cannot be truly compliant without being resilient, but you can be resilient without being compliant. Warriors, by their very nature and training, are resilient. It's time we become cyber warriors. We're not alone in our way of thinking. In a recent article, PwC noted There's a shift in security conversations this year. At the business level, we're talking less about an organization being secure and more about it being resilient. Resilient against supply chain disruptions, pandemics and severe climate events, economic uncertainty, and yes, the seemingly infinite number of cyber criminals probing every aspect of what used to be called your perimeter. As these factors continue to impact the productivity of not only our citizens, but those around the world, we will continue to see an increasing array of organizations and agencies step in, from best practice creation to the formation of global standards, from new laws created to hefty penalties for businesses and their executive teams and boards of directors. With the ever-increasing pressures of regulation and customer expectation, reliance on third parties the need to share data will continue to shift this landscape. Even when corporations can invest in their own cybersecurity programs to protect their environments, they now must include their customers and their suppliers' security into those considerations. Business leaders are expecting their IT and security staffs to figure this out. For organizations that have both IT and security leaders, they have historically been naturally at odds. One focused on performance and keeping the business running, and the other focused on risk identification and remediation strategies. The responsibility for remediation extends beyond the security teams and sometimes beyond the organization's IT control, as more critical data is accessed and owned by partners. Fully remote workers often lack the same security controls as workers who are within corporate confines and networks. Yet, many security teams consider their remote access security problem already solved. Ever-growing adoption of cloud services and the evolving work habits is expanding the attack surface faster than threat detection and response controls can mature. If you're wondering, where do I start? You're not alone. If you want a checklist, this one aligns with the White House's recent recommendations as well as the insurance industry's top controls. If you're looking to become resilient, this is your list. And who knows resilience better than Rocky Balboa? You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much can you take and keep moving forward? That's how winning is done. And that's how cyber resilience is done. The basic 8, securing the attack surface. The best way to secure the attack surface to implement a next generation antivirus in the form of an endpoint detection and response solution. Cyber hygiene. Most of the problems at the core are unpatched systems. As simple as that may be, it takes 277 days to identify a missing patch. You have to monitor the environment continuously and autonomously so that you can have an ever-evolving baseline. Multi-factor authentication, implemented everywhere, all the time, and required. Business continuity requires a comprehensive backup and disaster recovery strategy, and it requires regular training and testing of that strategy. Frequently, organizations will say they have backups, but only when they go to use them, they realize they can't recover. Data protection, the use of encryption for data at rest and data in motion, everywhere, all the time. The creation of an incident response plan. Planning is imperative. Most organizations don't do this well. We strongly recommend that you consider creating an incident response plan, updating that plan annually, and testing it frequently. As your business changes, so does your incident response plan. And last but far from least, education and awareness. We must train our associates. We must train our business partners. We must train all the time, regularly, and test that training. If you do these things, you will become resilient against cyber attack. As you can see, we have 5 megatrends that are indeed destabilizing our digital world. Their impact on cyber will continue to grow and evolve. The widening gap between talent supply and talent demand, when combined with an attack surface that's expanding and morphing faster than even our current artificial intelligence toolsets can keep up. It's time to embrace a resilience-first approach toward protecting enterprises. Thank you for your time and your consideration.